Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for today's video as we continue our off-season preview series here on the channel. This one specifically focused on those Los Angeles Lakers. So if you're a big-time Los Angeles Lakers fan, welcome to Utility Sports. Hopefully you guys do enjoy the content today. If so, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more future uploads, of course. And let's jump into that video preview here, not waste any of your time today. We're going to start with a season recap in this one, look at what happened with this most recent Lakers season. I think having a good understanding of where the team is at currently and most recently paints a better picture moving forward on what this team still needs, areas of improvement, and what they could look to do and accomplish this offseason. We'll then look at their NBA draft pick that they have this year, emphasis on the word pick. They only have one selection, and it's not a very high one. But we'll look at some draft targets who could make some sense for them still with that pick. A lot of work goes into, of course, the draft process year in, year out, so that I can tell you guys who the Lakers should target at pick number 55. We'll also look at NBA free agency for this team. Do they have actual meaningful ways to cap space or not? The answer is probably not, but you never know. Sign and trades exist, so they could maybe find a way in there. We'll look at NBA trade assets that they have too. Who could they look to move in the market? They do have some interesting pathways there that I think are very notable. And then are they in a position to maybe go after a big-time trade target? We'll talk about that in today's video as well. And then ultimately, at the conclusion of the video, give an early outlook for next year. You can't give a season recap, though, without mentioning the trade for Luka Doncic, and this was the headliner. And at the end of the day, this is the currency that the NBA is built on. It's a four-letter word, and that four-letter word is hope. And the trade for Luka Doncic gave the Lakers fans a huge boost of long-term hope. And as long as you're selling hope to your fans, you're going to be able to hold onto your job. Really, at the end of the day, that is a majority of what NBA decision-making is about, is putting your fan base and your team in a position where there is hope for the future, hope for improvement, hope for the long-term outlook of your team. And the trade for Luka Doncic completely revitalized the Lakers' long-term hope in a way that was unforeseeable before this past season. The long-term future of the Lakers post LeBron James at some point in time, with Anthony Davis being the guy, quote-unquote, I don't think was an attractive long-term plan for the Lakers. And to get out of that era where, yes, they won a title together in the bubble, but since then haven't really accomplished to the level that you would hope a LeBron James-led team could, the Luka Doncic trade, I think, gave this team a real rejuvenation. We saw it in the regular season as the Luka acquisition powered the Lakers to a 50-32 record, finished third in the Western Conference. Now, things did not end well, and I thought we saw a lot of the flaws on the team after the Luka trade, where the roster just wasn't built in a way to best fit Luka. And of course, with how things all kind of came to fruition, the surprise midnight trade for Luka, not enough time to really figure out or pull off other big trades. They tried to get Mark Williams. Things just didn't work out there, of course, with that failed physical. The Lakers were not ready to really compete in the postseason this year, and I think in hindsight we can really see that after their first-round exit to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And it was a really, really rough series from J.J. Redick, who, all things considered, I thought had a brilliant rookie year head coaching in the NBA. I thought he did a fantastic job leading the Lakers this past season. There were some bumps in the road. You think about the transition defense, which was a real challenge early. But I think there's enough here, and I thought we saw a lot during the regular season especially, that points and paints J.J. Redick as a very good long-term coach and the right man for the job for the Lakers moving forward. Now, there were some flaws, and I think that postseason series against Minnesota was a real indicator of some of the shortcomings he had. Now, the roster wasn't, again, in a spot that it was fair to expect them to go deep in the playoffs this year, but the decision to play as small as they did, some of that forced, right? But at the same time, it was still a conscious decision he was making to avoid playing a center at all. And then the decision to not play Dalton Connect and playing Gabe Vincent over him. I do think there were some head-scratching decisions for me when it came to how JJ Redick not only controlled the rotation, but also the actual scheme going into the postseason against Minnesota, where he aggressively sent 2 guys at Anthony Edwards and made the game really easy for Minnesota's role players. I was pretty disappointed by the short playoff series there between Minnesota and LA, and I think specifically Redick did not have a great postseason for himself as a first-time head coach, but cheers to future opportunities for him to improve, because with LeBron James there, with the sounds of it being that he's going to opt into his player option, LeBron had another great season. All NBA honors again. Just truly a spectacular player, someone who will never see another guy like him in the NBA. The longevity, the greatness, both from a cerebral and physical standpoint, the skill set. There's just never going to be another LeBron James. And, I feel like the last few years, especially as we've entered the twilight of his career, I've just been able to sit back and enjoy watching him and really kind of take in the greatness as much as I can, because it's just, I'm in awe watching him, because it's just incredible what he's doing at 40 years old. Austin Reeves, 20-point per game scorer this past year, took that huge leap forward that I think a lot of Lakers fans were expecting, and deserves a lot of credit for kind of shifting and being able to shift his play, especially with the arrival of Luka Doncic, kind of functioning as that off-ball third ball handler off of LeBron and Luka. It's not an easy role to be in, but I thought Reeves kind of fit that role very, very well. Hachimura had a good season for himself, shot the ball relatively well for his standards, especially shot over 40% from 3. Now, I do think there are still some shortcomings in his overall play style. The lack of readiness to play off the catch at times, especially when it comes to just taking catch and shoot threes off of Luka, drive and kick. It's still a learning curve for him. I think going into next year, maybe with more reps this offseason and more of kind of an understanding of what kind of looks he can get playing off of Luka, we might see a better off the catch Rui next year. But even if you go back to his Gonzaga play style, the pull up middies and want to catch, dribble the ball, dribble the air out of it a little bit as a 4. Like, some of that's just ingrained into his style. So I'm not going to hold my breath here on Hachimura. I do think he's a quality player, a skilled player for sure, but is he the best fit long-term for the Lakers? We'll see. We'll talk about that. Dorian Finney-Smith, quality year. Of course, started the year in Brooklyn. I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith's a 3-and-D player. You're not going to get a whole lot from him. He finished 2s at a pretty good clip this year, shot over 55% on 2s for the season, which was pretty good. But I think all things considered, everyone knows what you're getting with Dorian Finney-Smith. Kind of a little bit of a slippage over the last couple of years as well with his ability to guard out on the perimeter against quicker players. I do think he has lost a step laterally for sure. But, he's still a solid rotation player for sure. Jackson Hayes, I thought, second half of the year, once Luka arrived, really gave the Lakers great energy, great effort, and a great lob threat in the half court offensively. And obviously, when you have LeBron and Luka, you already have 2 of the all-time great playmakers. You're going to be a threat as someone who can run to the rim, jump, and catch lobs. And that's what Jackson Hayes did really well. Now, was he overtaxed being a starting center in the NBA? For sure. Is he a starting caliber big? No. Is there a reason he's playing on the minimum contract? Yes. But I think going forward, if the Lakers do ultimately decide to keep him on a minimum, can he be a rotation 12 to 15 minutes a night kind of guy during the regular season? 110% he can be that for them, especially with this caliber of playmaking. Now, could the Lakers be way better if they had 2 really good centers? Yes, of course. Center play is really at the crux of winning, especially in the regular season. In the NBA, if you have good centers, you're going to win a lot of games. The Lakers right now don't have a single good center. They need to find ways to get one, at least, maybe 2 if they're lucky. But all things considered, Hayes, I thought, did a fairly solid job given the circumstances post the Anthony Davis trade. And then Dalton Knecht, I think one of the most underrated seasons across the entire NBA this past year. If you look at his numbers from a per 36 standpoint, he played 78 games, played 19 minutes a night, had to deal with a crazy trade during the season where he got shipped out for Mark Williams. Ultimately, that trade got rescinded and nixed, and now all of a sudden he's going back to LA after being at a Hornets practice. It was a really crazy turn of events for him. But all things considered, he was very effective. Shot well on 2-pointers this season. Shot the ball really well on 3s like you would have expected coming out of Tennessee from a year ago as a 2024 NBA draft prospect. And I think one of the biggest mistakes for Redick was not trying to play him more in the playoffs. Now, I know the Lakers were looking at the defensive side of the floor and needing more length and athleticism and stuff, but let's be honest, Gabe Vincent wasn't giving you that. So I would have played Dalton Knecht more in the playoffs, tried to space and try and score back on Minnesota a bit more than the Lakers were capable of. But I do think Knecht going forward, there's going to be some bumps in the road, but I do think he is an NBA rotation player for sure, kind of matching what I viewed him as coming out of the draft in his own draft class a year ago. So when it comes to this year's draft, the Lakers have pick number 55 in the 2025 NBA draft, and there are some solid prospects who could be potential targets for the Lakers. Yannick Niederhauser out of Penn State has been one of the biggest risers in the NBA draft process this year. Absolutely dominated the G League Elite Camp and then went to the Combine and did very well there as well. I think he's definitely a player who will get drafted this year on draft night. It has been a thinned out draft class, and this is one of the new ramifications of NIL and how attractive it can be for some good college basketball players to stay in college for a third, fourth, fifth season in some cases. You look at someone like Yaxel Lendeberg, who decided to make that decision and go back to school. You look at someone like Tahad Pettiford, who after a really strong freshman year for Auburn off the bench, decided to go back to school again and pass up the NBA draft after his freshman season, limiting the one-and-done potential in this year's class. So the Lakers are going to have to get a little creative here. Someone like Rocco Zikarsky from the NBL, played for the Brisbane Bullets, and stands at 7'3", so without shoes on, he's going to be a 7'4" big in the NBA, playing with shoes. And obviously, he can protect the rim. He's large. He's a huge human being. Now, I think there are some missing components for him to being an actual good NBA big man. I think the lack of touch, the lack of ferociousness as a big man, something I typically don't talk too much about is, the aggression standpoint, but I think it really does stand out to me with Zikarsky every time I've turned on his film over the last couple of years. He just doesn't get after it enough for someone his size, and I think that's a real separating difference between someone like him and Zach Edey, who have very similar physical measurements. Edey's kind of got that little punk to him where he's going to get after you and he wants to rip the rim off and do all these things. And Zikarsky's more okay with playing as a finesse big. And at 7'3", it's probably not the best play style for him. So I think all things considered, Zikarsky could still be a valuable pickup for the Lakers at 55 because it's so late in the draft and he's so tall and huge that he still will have rim protection value. But to me, he's a very reminiscent player of Jock Landale, who has been kind of a third-string NBA center. So Zikarsky a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit less mobile than Landale, but I think all things considered here, Zikarsky at 55 could still make some sense. Sion James out of Duke, I think would be a really, really strong get. This is a guy who was very effective on his catch-and-shoot opportunities at Duke, played off of a heliocentric player like Cooper Flagg in that offense there, a very pro-styled offense that the Blue Devils run under John Shire. I think James would be a tremendous get and, of course, can really, really defend out on the perimeter. I think this is like the guy that the Lakers, if he's there, should take on draft night. Obviously, assuming some other player isn't available that I have higher on my board. We'll see what happens with all that. But Jameer Watkins, Florida State, he ended up staying in the draft class this year. Long arms, can be impactful defensively. There's some tools there to work with. Hanson Yang, skilled big man. Really don't think he's the best long-term fit with Luka. I think for Luka specifically, you're looking for screen roll value, someone who can catch the ball above the rim and play out of the pocket. I'm not sure, Hanson Yang, very skilled big. I'm not sure if he has the physical tools to really work with Luka, and I don't think he has the defensive anchor ability that the Lakers are going to be searching for. But let's be honest, at 55, it's going to be hard to get that. Isan Almanza, another player who, he's a skilled big man, can really function at the short roll. I think a very cerebral player, smart, can pass the basketball. I don't think that's the best fit with Luka, if I'm being completely honest with you. Now, it does help in the situations where he's blitzed, having a guy who can make passes and reads. But at the end of the day, you want someone who's going to put some pressure on the rim, score the ball at the rim, catch lobs. Almanza's not going to give you a ton of that. Grant Nelson, very athletic wing, kind of reminds me of a very young Derrick Jones Jr. Very unpolished, needs a lot of work left on his game for him to become an NBA player, but that is pretty similar to the Derrick Jones Jr. pathway. Obviously came up through the G League and was part of a slam dunk contest when he was really young, and kind of got his name that way, but then over time added to the skill component of his game, catching and shooting from the corner, being an above the rim lob threat in transition, and of course defending on the basketball. And I think Grant Nelson has a lot of physical tools to work with. If you throw on his NDSU tape for more than a minute, you're going to see this kid jumping out of the gym. Now his athletic gifts showed out a little bit less frequently in the SEC against better competition, which is why Grant Nelson's not going to be a top 30, top 40 player on pretty much anyone's big board. But I do think this is a player that if you're willing to commit long-term investment into in terms of developing, there are some tools to work with there when it comes to play finishing, an emerging three-point shot, and of course some physical gifts that are pretty fun to watch at the very least. John Broom's a good basketball player, really great for Auburn this past year. Is he going to be an impact player in the NBA? Probably not, but again, we're talking about pick 55. These are some targets that I think could make some sense for the Lakers to consider and look at, but again, you can't really bank on pick 55 to completely change your season. I am a big believer that you can find talent anywhere in the draft. Pick 55 is not an exclusion to that. They can get someone here who could play for them down the road, but to ask that player to be a big-time contributor as soon as next season, that's a little rich in my expectation. So when it comes to NBA free agency, who could the Lakers look to target? Of course, I mentioned that LeBron James player option earlier, $52.627 million, and I have seen a little bit of outrage on Twitter over the last little bit. Reminder, go follow me on Twitter. Link is in the description. Trying to get to 5,000 followers over there on X. People are upset about LeBron probably opting into his player option, but I do think this is a little bit of a double-edged sword here for a couple of reasons. LeBron, of course, someone who is a billionaire at this point in time, has made so much money in his NBA career. I understand the perspective of those saying, why can't he just take the minimum or take way less to try and help the Lakers form a super team or a much better team around him, try and pursue another championship? I do think there is a bit of pressure on LeBron James to continue to play on the maximum contract. One, he's worth it, but secondly, he has been the face of the NBA for 2 decades now at this point in time. And if he decides to not take the max, it sends a message across the entire league for star players to take significantly less than the max in order to stack their team, in order to load the dice for their roster. And I don't think that's a good message for the NBA. And I think there is pressure, whether it's from the commissioner's office or just internally, that he feels to not do something like that. And as long as he's worth the max, which he clearly is with his production yet at this point, he will continue to play on the max. And I understand the perspective. I understand why some Lakers fans would say he doesn't need that money. He should take way less. I totally get it, and in some ways I agree. But at the same time, I do think it would send a really bad message for the league, and I think it would be a very bad precedent. And I think with him being specifically the face of the league, the face of the Lakers franchise now for the last half decade plus, I just don't think it's a tenable actual situation for him to play out. Dorian Finney-Smith has a player option that he will definitely opt into, $15.378 million. I just do not see Dorian Finney-Smith turning down that kind of money at this point of his career. So with all of that considered, the Lakers are at a current projected maximum cap space number of negative $27.86 million. So not a lot to go around for the Lakers this offseason. They do have about $22 million in cap holds, even a little bit more than that, $22.8 million in cap holds. So you're really looking at a team that's closer to the first apron than they are to having cap space. Only about $4.4 million in space from the first apron. So there's already not a lot of flexibility. Now they do have some sign and trade mechanisms that they could work through, try and find a way to bring in some talent that way. Something the Clippers did last offseason. So if they want to steal some of the homework from their fellow LA team, definitely something that they could do. They'd have to get creative to stay under that first apron, but they do have some expiring contracts in Maxi Kleber, Gabe Vincent. They have some ways to work around it. So sign and trade, definitely not out of the question for the Lakers if they want to improve their roster that way. I do have a couple of trades in this video to talk about and one sign and trade target that does make some sense for the Lakers. And before we get there, let's talk about some of those trade assets. What do the Lakers have to give up? Well, they have some expiring salaries. Maxi Kleber, Gabe Vincent, I just mentioned both of them. You combine those two salaries, it's $22.5 million. That's very, very, very movable in today's NBA climate. Expiring salaries are like gold at times. It lets you get players that you wouldn't normally be able to get. It allows you to go out and make trades because some teams are looking for long-term financial flexibility. And being able to offer expirings can give you pathways to getting other guys on your roster that you otherwise would not have been able to land. And I think that's a key thing to watch for. And remember, the Lakers did that essentially with D'Angelo Russell this past season. They traded D'Lo an expiring salary to Brooklyn, for Dorian Finney-Smith with some draft capital in there. So keep that in mind moving forward, that expiring salaries are useful and that some teams are aggressively hunting for those throughout the offseason and upcoming trade deadline. Rui Hachimura is another expiring salary, of course. Now he's a significantly better player at this point than Kleba and Vincent. So Kleba and Vincent just bring back expiring salary value in a trade, whereas Hachimura is an actual good player that a team would probably want to keep if they get him in a trade, or would want to reroute him somewhere else. So I think he's a kind of a different tiered expiring salary than the Kleba and Vincent contracts we've talked about. You then look at their non-expiring salaries of value, and there's some significant differences in value here. We'll start with Dalton Knecht. I talked about him earlier. He had a very, very good season for himself as a rookie. I think was quite underrated with the way that he performed in his minutes. Obviously some really high ups and some very low downs along the way, but that's the life of being a shooter in the NBA. You're going to have stretches where you don't shoot the ball great, and you're going to have stretches where you shoot the ball amazing. And I think riding those highs and lows and just staying steady, even-keeled is the way to go throughout that process, especially as a fan and as a coach. Like, those are the things you have to do, and you have to trust that, hey, Dalton Knecht, who's going to probably be for the majority of his career a near 40% three-point shooter, if he's missed 5 in a row, the odds of him making the 6th one seem pretty good to me. But, I understand why some people don't feel that way at times. Jared Vanderbilt, he's got a 2+1 player option for that final season, $12.67 million annually. I do think he will ultimately play out this contract. Will take that player option that final year. The question is, will it be in LA or not? It's a very tradable contract, one that could definitely be beneficial for the Lakers to use as salary in a deal. And then Austin Reeves, probably the best contract in the league right now, and technically kind of an expiring. He's got a 1+1 player option for that final year that he will not pick up. I would be completely shocked if Austin Reeves opted into that final year of his deal. So the Lakers are kind of in a struggle point here where they have to look at this and say, we might have the final year of LeBron, maybe the final year of Austin Reeves, because he's going to have a very strong market. We'll have to bid for him and try and keep him. Now, I do think the Lakers would have the upper hand in ultimately doing so, but could they actually go out and try and trade Austin Reeves? Admittedly, I don't have any trades centered around Austin Reeves in today's video because I don't think that's going to be the main prerogative for the Lakers this offseason. But if they get offers for him, and I'm talking strong ones where you're getting a true established star back for him, I wouldn't completely hang up the phone. Now, I would be very averse to actually dealing him, but I think taking calls is always smart. Rob Pelinka tricked Nico Harrison into taking some calls earlier in 2025. Maybe the Lakers taking some more calls here, this time centered around Reeves, wouldn't be the worst idea either. When it comes to draft capital and trades, remember they do have pick 55. They have that 2030 swap option. They could trade their 2031 first. They could trade that completely unprotected or as a swap itself if they wanted to go that way. And then that 2032 first. There is a stipulation here because of the Stepien rule. They probably can't trade it unprotected if they want to include it with that 2031 first, but they could do a swap option on it. Or if they're leaving that 2031 first, which probably won't happen, they probably, if they're making a trade, would trade that 2031 first before the 2032 first. But in the event that they keep the 2031 first or just only offer swap rights on it, they could trade the 2032 first unprotected as soon as draft night this year. So keep that in mind. Very important thing to remember and consider. And let's move forward here into trade framework number 1. The Lakers, a team that I thought should really aggressively pursue Nic Claxton at the trade deadline this past year. After landing Luka Doncic, Nic Claxton was the guy I had highlighted, circled, underlined, italicized, all of that and more for the Lakers. I thought he would be a tremendous fit there. The Lakers and Nets have already done business together, and the Nets are a team that I could see pulling their roster apart a bit still at this point. The Nets have 4 first-round picks this year, 1 very high second-round pick, and in this trade, they get more future flexibility, which could be very, very valuable for Brooklyn, a team that appears to be circling Giannis Antetokounmpo as a potential target. Nic Claxton might be expendable for them. He's not the best fit into the Nets' actual offensive system moving forward and would be a brilliant fit around Luka Doncic. Luka needs a rim-running lob threat big who can set good screens, and that's what Nic Claxton does. He is one of the most effective rim finishers in the NBA when he's being set up by good point guard play. The Nets the last couple of years haven't quite had that, but if you go back to Claxton's final season with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant before the two of them ultimately requested a trade out of Brooklyn, that film on Nic Claxton is really darn good on both ends of the court. And I think you put him on a team with really great playmaking, which you have in Reeves and Luka and LeBron, and you put him on a team with championship aspirations, you're going to get the best version of Nic Claxton ASAP. He's somebody who, honestly, I thought should have garnered some significant Defensive Player of the Year love the final year that he was playing with Kyrie and KD. And I think for the Lakers, you need this kind of guy who can be an anchor for you, a real rim protector. It does come at a pretty heavy cost. You're giving up that swap option in 2030. You're giving up that 2031 first with a very light protection. But that's where the two expiring salaries here of Gabe Vincent and Maxi Kleber become extremely valuable. The Lakers can give up two guys who should not be in their rotation next year. Like, Gabe Vincent's not good. Maxi Kleber is not good at this point of his career. You give up those two guys and far out future draft capital to start maximizing the Luka era in LA right now. And I love this trade for the Lakers. We're going to look at trade framework number 2, though, here. And this one's a little bit of a cheaper option, but one that does make some sense for both sides here. Dalton Connect and pick 55 in this year's draft go to the Orlando Magic. The Magic badly need three-point shooting. Dalton Connect, who had already been agreed to be traded one time to Charlotte, now ultimately gets sent down a little further south to Orlando. And the Magic, I think, can maximize his shooting quite a bit. They have a really great defensive team infrastructure around him to protect him. I think his movement shooting skills would be extremely valuable there in Orlando. And the Lakers aren't getting a slouch here. They're getting Goga Bitadze, who is one of the most underrated players in the entire league. I think an important nuance here too, Orlando actually dips out of the first apron with this trade. I think a very important, kind of little nuance in this deal with the way the Magic structured Jalen Suggs' contract to be relatively front-loaded. If they can save money this upcoming season, which is what this deal does for them, and they still have 2 first-round picks at 16 and 25, Orlando can find a way to still be a good competitive team, add a skill set that they need in shooting in Dalton Connect, and dip out of the apron. And the Lakers get a really underrated big man here in Goga Bitadze, someone who I think can be a very impactful big for them. I think an underrated rim protector, a very skilled big. Again, this isn't the traditional rim roll lob threat type that, again, I think is best with Luka, but you're getting some very good touch around the rim with Bitadze. And a guy who can definitely make reads out of the pinch post and be a passer for you in your half-court offense. And I think with J.J. Redick's play design, that's something that Bitadze is going to bring to L.A. that Jackson Hayes just simply never, ever could. And it makes the Lakers a whole lot better right now. Trade framework number 3, we are looking at one of those sign-and-trade options. And it is for a traditional rim-rolling, sit-in-the-dunker spot, catch lobs big, in Clint Capela, someone who has had the honor of playing with James Harden and Trae Young for his entire NBA career. And those two guys have helped this dude make a lot of money and be functional offensively. And if you put him with Luka, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Very point blank and simple. Capela is going to be doing the same old things he's always done. Sit in the dunker spot, screen and roll, catch lobs. And that's what he is going to do for LA. And he gets, on this trade framework, he signs a 3-year, about $28 million deal. A very movable contract at $9.6 million. Now, if you're watching from the Hawks perspective, you might say, okay, well, why would Atlanta do this? There's actually a few reasons why, okay? First of all, the Hawks, a team that probably isn't planning on keeping Clint Capela going into next season anyway. The benefits of this here, they open up a trade exception by making this kind of trade while still shaving off some of that salary, replenishing some of their guard depth. And I do think in a pinch that Jordan Goodwin and Shake Milton could both fill some minutes for Atlanta, who still needs more ball handling off the bench. Now, I do not believe in Shake Milton. I'm not a big Shake Milton guy. I don't think he's really an NBA rotation player, but Jordan Goodwin can guard. And the Hawks, with a newfound defensive identity, trying to build a good team defense in the moments that Trae Young is out of the game, Jordan Goodwin can still pick up your pace, initiate a little bit of offense for you, but predominantly is going to be picking up 94 feet and guarding. And I think there is some value here for Atlanta in that realm, while opening up a trade exception, a pretty decently sized one, about $4 or $5 million, which could be useful for them at the trade deadline if they want to go that way. and just shaving off some money by letting Capela go elsewhere. This is an example of helping one of your players go where he wants to go, where he's going to be impactful, and I think the Lakers would welcome Clint Capela with open arms, and I think the Hawks would be smart and wise to do something like this, even though it's not a great return. If you're not planning on keeping Capela anyway, you get off of him moving forward, and you add a little bit of depth into your backcourt with very cheap contracts, movable contracts, and opening up a trade exception in the process. And then it comes to trade framework number 4, and this is the big one. This is the one that's probably not too realistic, if I'm being completely honest, but it's one I did want to touch on because it really stems from the Cavaliers making a big-time decision moving forward. The Cavs are really deep into the second apron. One of the few ways that they can get out of the second apron is if they find a suitor for Max Strus. That could be the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets have cap space this offseason. Brooklyn is going to be a very useful team for other teams to work with if they want to dump salary. And in this three-team trade composition, not only is Cleveland saving money, they're making a pretty big roster decision, moving off of their double big lineup, which was so good in the regular season in Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, and ultimately saying Jarrett Allen's not the playoff performer we need him to be. Let's go get a forward who can really shoot the lights out of the basketball, improve our team spacing, improve our half-court offense even more, and that guy is Cam Johnson. In this deal, they also walk out with Noah Clowney to kind of function as that third or fourth big for them throughout the course of a long 82-game regular season for depth purposes. The Cavs save about $11 million in this process, gets them out of that second apron threshold, which is a pretty good little nugget here for them to get out of. Brooklyn gets Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Maxi Kleber. They don't take on too much long-term salary, which is good. They get those Lakers picks in 2030 and 2031, and the Lakers walk out with their starting center for the next 5 years in Jarrett Allen, someone who is already under contract for a while on a very fair contract, a very good contract, and he makes the Lakers a whole lot better now. I think for Cleveland, this is a little too extreme, probably not a decision that they'll actually land on this offseason, but I wanted to touch on this because I do think these three teams specifically together could all help each other out in a way. The Cavs can kind of redefine their roster, strengthen their depth on the forward wing spots, and improve over what Max Strus has been for them on the wings, and Jarrett Allen, who's had some real playoff letdowns. You know, the lights were a little too bright. You guys probably catching my drift in the quote there. The Cavs get Cam Johnson, really good player, really valuable player. The Nets get draft picks for this and help the Cavs save a lot of money. And then the Lakers get a starting center, something they really badly need, and someone who is a true defensive anchor in Jarrett Allen and an elite screen and roll big man for Luka to play with. So when it comes to next season, what is an early outlook and what's a realistic expectation? It's super safe to bet that this team wins at least 45 games next year. They won 50 games this most recent season. I think the West is going to be extremely competitive. The Spurs are coming with Wemby. The West is going to be a bloodbath again, of course. But I think all things considered, Luka Doncic-led team is going to be a good team in the NBA most years, pretty much every single time. And they're going to win a lot of games. They're going to be a playoff team. I guarantee it right now, and assuming health, right? And then, of course, they're going to have a chance to go deep in the West. When you have Luka Doncic on your team, you have a chance to play with anybody. You have a chance to beat anybody. And I do think over the course of a 16-game format, you have to win 16 games to win the NBA Finals. If the Lakers make the right moves, go out and get a couple bigs like Capela, Bitadze, or if they go out and get Nic Claxton and another big to back him up, they can really easily redefine their team and improve drastically going into next season. And I think that will be all of the difference that Luka and the Lakers need in order to push the chips in and win. Thank you all so much for watching, Lakers fans. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If you're new to the channel, again, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Appreciate y'all for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.